Evening, everybody. I have two crazy stories to tell you tonight. And, well, the first one involves gambling and ethics violations from a former Liberal MP. And the guy just stepped down recently because of, quote, gambling addiction problems. Okay, so we'll get into that and then into the other one. Did you know Bill Morneau is really, really rich? I didn't know that he was really, really rich. He's really, really rich. Actually, his wife is really, really rich. She's Nancy McCain, and Nancy McCain is heir to the McCain Foods, frozen foods, including Maple Leaf Foods enterprise. So she's really, really rich. And so he's really, really rich. I'll show you a picture of his house. But first, the Globe and Mail is reporting RCMP probed former Liberal MP Raj Grewal's gambling for months. The RCMP have been investigating former Liberal MP Raj Grewal for months, closely analyzing millions of dollars in transactions, including at a casino near Parliament Hill, and occasionally tracking his movements, federal sources say. Mr. Grewal resigned last week from the Liberals caucus and his seat of Brampton East, taking Parliament Hill by surprise, given that he was recently nominated to run for a second term in the next election. However, there have been growing interest by law enforcement authorities into Mr. Grewal's gambling activities, according to the sources, who were granted anonymity by the Globe and Mail to discuss confidential information that they are not permitted to disclose. These sources have direct knowledge of the investigation. So, fair warning, everybody, this is a red flashing light for maybe this isn't true, but this is worthwhile, and I'll show you why. Miss Rempel actually questions Mr. Hassan about aspects of this in their standing committee, and I've got tweets about that. So back to the art. I just wanted to say, whenever people don't want to be identified, there's something off about the story, or there's something strange about it. But there's enough corroborating evidence here that I think this is worth a mention. Okay, so back to the story. The sources say that Mr. Grewal spent millions of dollars in total in the past 3 years, including at the Casino de Luc Limy, I guess, which Lotto Quebec runs across the Ottawa River from Parliament Hill. The Prime Minister's office said after Mr. Grewal resigned from the former MP, and that the former MP is dealing with a gambling problem. Mr. Grewal is also under investigation by the Federal Ethics Commissioner for bringing Yusuf I don't know how to say his last name. I'll try it again later. Chief Executive of ZGemi, Inc., to an event during the Prime Minister's trip to India. Mr. Yenilmez, no, I've got it terrible there. His company also paid Mr. Grewal employment income while he was an elected official and is a co-debtor on a vehicle loan for the former MP. So he helped him get a car loan, and he pays his salary while Mr. Grewal is a sitting MP. And Mr. Grewal is getting his hands on millions of dollars, but also has a car loan. So that's weird, right? Back to the article. One of the sources said Mr. Grewal's gambling activities triggered the disclosure requirements of the Financial Transactions and Report Analysis Centre of Canada, FinTrack, under which casinos must report transactions of more than $10,000 a day. Another federal source said Mr. Grewal exceeded that threshold many times over on occasion at the casino. FinTrack relayed information to the RCMP. The police force eventually transferred the file to its national division, which is responsible for political matters. In addition to looking into financial transactions, the RCMP sometimes followed Mr. Grewal, from Parliament Hill to the casino as part of the investigation, one source said. According to the sources, RCMP recently informed the House of Commons of their investigations so they could have access to the parliamentary records involving Mr. Grewal. Under the concept of parliamentary privilege, the Speaker of the House must give consent before executing a search warrant or production order on Parliament Hill. The Speaker's office said on Monday that it cannot comment on specific cases. The RCMP's national division would not confirm or deny that it is investigating Mr. Grewal. So this is still a very early stage story. These are unnamed sources. It's still not up in the air, but it is certainly early in the reporting. However, today during question period, Mercedes Stephenson is reporting. This is the immigration and refugees question period. And Michelle Rempel is questioning why there's a picture of Mr. Ahmed Hassan with, and I can't remember his last name. Hold on, I'll find it. Okay, Mr. Yenilmez. That's what I'm going to go with. Yenilmez. So I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but that's what it's going to be. So the owner and chief executive of ZGemi and the person who pays Mr. Grewal and the person who co-signed his auto loan has a picture with Mr. Hassan, right? So it's kind of strange. And here he is with defense ministers, right? So, and this is Mr. Grewal here. And this is Mr. Yenilmez. So these are ethic violations. This guy's gambling millions of dollars across the street from Parliament Hill, and he's presumably under investigation by the RCMP, and so that leads to this. So the chair is denying Michelle Rempel point of order as she tries to question Honorable Ahmed Hassan on Raj Grewal's applications on immigration requests. Rempel wins and asks Hassan about his involvement in Grewal's requests. Rempel asks that the minister be examined under oath for the rest of the meeting. MPs are now voting whether Hassan should be under oath for the rest of this meeting. For those following along at home, this is all about Raj Grewal, the former Liberal MP who police were looking into, who PMO says resigned over a gambling addiction. Rempel is now asking about the man Grewal took to meet the Prime Minister in India and is facing investigation. Rempel asks why Hassan has a picture with the same person, Yusuf Yenilmez, thanking him for bringing a large team to door knock. To be clear, is facing an ethics violation. Ethics investigation. Sorry, not violation. Ethics investigation. The Liberals voted against putting the minister under oath. Isn't that wonderful when you can vote to allow him to lie? That's fine, no problems. Rempel asks what the Liberals are hiding, says she wants to know about resources Hassan's office put towards Grewal's, who Rempel says is under RCMP investigation, interventions. The meeting has basically descended into a giant argument now between two MPs over who interrupts more. So again, our Canadian standing committees, and this one is no different on immigration and refugees, is descending into name calling and an MP not willing to truthfully answer questions because they're uncomfortable, because there's ethic violations here and there's serious questions that need to be asked. Like, are you also accepting a salary from this gentleman? What other perks does he get for paying that salary? He clearly got perks for paying this gentleman a salary. He got invites to and access to high-ranking Canadian government officials, right? He's got, look at that picture. That's $1 million picture. Oh, right? Let it all go on black, right? Or red, one or the other. I guess this guy's a red kind of guy. Who knows what he was gambling at the casino? But the point is, this is a very, very different story than this gentleman has a gambling addiction and has a problem and needs to step down. There are questions, and I'm glad the RCMP is potentially investigating. I think there are questions that need to be answered, and they're the ones who need to be asking them. Like, where did you get the millions of dollars? And why were you doing that during work time? And $10,000 a day is a lot of money. How'd you get it? Because we know what your salary is because it's public. $10,000 a day is not what a sitting MP gets, last I checked. So either maybe he's a very good gambler. Maybe this gentleman here wanted him gambling a lot and thought, well, he can moonlight as a blackjack player. I don't know. Okay, so next story up. And I wanted to set this up because I didn't know much about Mr. Morneau other than he was trying desperately to pull off a Will Ferrell impression the whole time he's been finance minister. And he's so close. He's so close. But he's married to Nancy McCain. Who's Nancy McCain? Well, I'll read this article to let you know what I know. And this is their house. This is their house in, where did it say? In Bennington Heights. So that should give you an example or a clue as to how expensive Bennington Heights just sounds like an expensive place. Okay. Nancy McCain is an heir to the privately held multi-billion-dollar McCain Foods empire co-founded by her late father, Andrew McCain, and three uncles, Harrison, Wallace, and Bob, all deceased. Nancy McCain's husband, Bill Morneau, is Canada's finance minister and previously was executive chairman of the billion-dollar human resources consultancy Morneau Chappell, which his father, William Morneau Sr., founded. Her brother, Allison McCain, yes, is the current chairman of McCain Foods. Nancy's cousin is Michael McCain, who is CEO and the largest shareholder of the $4 billion Canadian food giant. Maple Leaf Foods. Little is known about the distribution of profits for the McCain company to the family members. Public court filings show that at least one of the Wallace chain's children, Nancy's cousin, receives an annual $4.25 million tax-free capital dividend. Public records show that Bill Morneau received compensation in excess of $1 million prior to his resignation from his company to become Canada's finance minister, while strict conflict of interest rules apply to Morneau's personal holdings in his capacity as finance minister. They do not apply to the personal holdings of Nancy McCain and, by extension, McCain Foods. Okay, so I mean that seems pretty straightforward and pretty. That's who they are, right? I asked Google who's Bill Morneau's wife, and it came back Nancy McCain, and it even says it on Wikipedia. So she says Morneau lives in Toronto, has 3 children, and with his wife Nancy McCain, the member of the New Brunswick family who owns McCain Foods. McCain Foods owns Maple Leaf. They're a Subsidy, right? They're a Subsidy, and they just got $660 million. Well, they just invested $660 million, but let's skip down to the fine print here. The project, coming at a total cost of $660 million, is being funded largely by the company, with $34.5 million coming from the province and $20 million from the federal government and $8 million from the Agri-Innovate Fund. McCain calls it the largest single investment ever in Canadian food industry history during a formal announcement Tuesday morning at the Canadian Centre for Product Validation in Southeast London. So isn't it wonderful that a highly placed McCain family member was right there, and her husband was able to write that $20 million check. I wonder if anybody mentioned that. I couldn't find it. I didn't look, but I wonder if anybody mentioned that. McCain Foods also is the owner of ZGemi Halal, I've heard. So that's an interesting aside note. So that's 2 crazy stories that I thought were just wild about Liberal MPs. And look at how big Bill Morneau's house is. Maybe, that's Dave Thompson's house. Sorry, this one's Bill Morneau's house. Not much of a picture. Sorry. I thought this was other pictures of the same house. I was wrong. Sorry about that, everyone. So, crazy stories. I'm interested to see how the Mr. Grewal's gambling stuff turns out. I'm interested to see how the ethics stuff works out. I'm interested to see why Mr. Husson has a picture. Well, why, what's the connection here? Why do they know each other? And why is this okay? Is it, do we have a pay for play access? If you pay enough money and have the right friends in Parliament, then you have access to the Canadian government. I don't know. It seems a little off to me. There's something else. There's more to both of these stories. They're both just kind of starting. So interesting. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night.